Have you ever wondered why a photograph that we believe to be incredible doesn't receive the recognition that we expect? Today I'd like to delve into the fascinating world of emotional attachment in photography and its profound impact on our perception of our very own work. In this discussion, I'd like to also suggest solutions on how to deal with this phenomenon, to make sure that we see our own photography for what it actually is and not for what we believe it is. My name is Martin Osner and welcome to my world of fine art photography. What I'd like to share with you today is based on my experience, and I trust that there is something meaningful that you can take from this discussion. Does this not sound all too familiar? We sit down to present our latest photograph in a competition, and we can't help but feel a surge of excitement. To us, the photograph is an absolute masterpiece. But once again, the judges fail to share our enthusiasm. And it's not necessarily that the judges are unprofessional. I mean, they pretty much got it right with most of the other photographs that they judged that day. But maybe it's just that I'm unlucky. Or maybe it's just that they don't see things the way I see it. And I'm sure one day these judges will come around. And then, of course, there's the perplexing world of social media. We post a photograph with high expectations, and yet the response sometimes is just underwhelming. And we think maybe it's because we didn't include the right text. Maybe it's the wrong title. Maybe it's the wrong keywords. I mean, how many of you have gone into Instagram analytics itself to have a look at which photographs are faring best? And then we spot one right at the bottom and we say, no, man, that can't be right. And then we start to doubt analytical data. If you're a photographer, I am sure you know exactly what I am talking about at the moment. And what about those of you who are like me, who sell your work? You add a photograph to your portfolio expecting to do well, or you exhibit it and it just doesn't. You see, in my experience, the answer lies in what I call emotional attachment, a phenomenon that distorts our judgment. It's almost like parents who believe that their child is the most beautiful or the most talented, regardless of the reality around them. When our first child was born, I honestly couldn't understand why all the other newly born children in the hospital were nowhere near as beautiful as Matthew was. I mean, as parents, we just got it right, and we were streaks ahead of the others. And then when each of our girls came along, once again, in my mind, Anita and I were the stars of the show. And maybe that's just something that gets put in us so that we don't reject our own. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert in this field. But sometimes when it comes to looking at our own work and deciphering how good our own work is, we pretty much fall into this, let's call it a natural trap in any case. It's like, for those of you who are parents out there, I mean, you'd understand this. It's like entering your child into a baby competition. Man, that's just one thing I'd never want to do. I mean, I'd hate to be a judge on a baby competition. Why? Well, it's because there's only one family who's going to be happy with your decision. The rest are going to want a stone for it, and they're going to truly believe you got it wrong. And coming back to photography, I've always said that a good photograph doesn't need explanation. It can stand on its own, and it can speak for itself. And one of the most powerful inclusions is mystery. People want to know what they don't know. And this is a subject that I'll deal with on another day. But I was reminded of the topic that we're talking about today when it comes to emotional attachment earlier this week, when I wrote a story which I posted on our Inspire community on the Art Photography Academy. And with the reaction I got, I decided I really must discuss this with you on my channel. So what is it then that clouds our vision? What is it that makes us believe that what we have captured is truly spectacular? Do we ever get out to see or experience our photographs as others do? I mean, is it actually possible? And before I try answer these questions or give you some advice of, let's call it blind man syndrome, I'd like to tell you a story behind two photographs I took, in my mind, equally as spectacular. And before I get into these stories, remember one of the obstacles that we face, or one of the opportunities that we have, is that photography is a reality-driven medium. Alfred Sicklitz, a photographer and modern art promoter at the turn of the last century, summed it up beautifully when he said, "In photography, there is a reality so subtle that it becomes more real than reality." And because photography is such a reality-driven medium, very often circumstances that are real to us, like situations that we have experienced, emotions that we have felt, memories that we have harvested, all contribute to our interpretation and the value we place on our photograph. And not only the ones we have taken, but also the ones that other photographers have captured. Dorothy Lang, the famous American documentary photographer who photographed during the times of the Great Depressions, summed it up beautifully by saying, "Photography takes an instant out of time, altering life by holding it still." These two comments, I think, sum up what I want to discuss with you now. So coming back to the statement I made earlier where I said that a photograph doesn't have to be explained, Elliot Erwitt famously said, "The whole point of taking a picture is that you don't have to explain things in words." And I mean, this is the reason why I personally find more value in other photographers' work than mine. And it's because their work holds a mystery. With mine, I know everything. With theirs, I don't. And I connect with it based on my own experiences, not theirs. Often I have clients who purchase one of my artworks based on a memory of theirs that was ignited through a photograph or an artwork of mine. So it's like, oh my word, that tree reminds me of one we used to have in our back garden when I was growing up, and I absolutely love it. So as you can see, there's an involvement from both sides, from the one who creates the photograph in the first place, or the artwork, and from those who see value and experiences in that. So with that in mind, let's get into the two photographs that I'd like to discuss with you. So the first story I'd like to tell you is about a photograph I took in the Namibian desert on the 11th of July 2011. This particular photograph made such an impact on me that I can recall it as if it was yesterday. For those who don't know where Namibia is, it's right here in Southwest Africa. The country is predominantly desert, flanked by the Atlantic Ocean. And to this day, it remains one of my all-time favorite photography destinations. It's literally miles and miles of nothing. For those of you who follow the Grand Tour, you might recall in the first series where Jeremy Clarkson, Richard Hammond, and James May made their way in beach buggies up the Skeleton Coast and into Angola. In this episode, Jeremy Clarkson, who has been to just about every corner of the planet, said that it is one of the most beautiful landscapes he has ever seen, and he is quite correct. In 2011, I decided to visit just after the rains. I was on an expedition to capture desert landscapes and to add photographs to my abandoned project, which I was working on at the time. One day I stumbled across this structure, which I photographed. I found out later from the people of the Namibia that it serves as a church, as a community hall, and as a classroom. And if you look carefully, you'll see the bell right here. And when I say I found it in the middle of nowhere, I literally mean I found it in the middle of nowhere. After I had taken this shot, I noticed that the sky was getting dark on the horizon. And it wasn't rain, but a sandstorm approaching. I got back into the Land Rover and tried to head back for camp, which was deeper in the canyon, and I knew that that would offer some more protection from the storm. But literally within minutes, the visibility went from manageable to absolutely zero. So I had to stop driving. And the car shook as the wind gust, like I'd never experienced before, came pounding in, wave after wave. I mean, the car got literally sandblasted. I closed all the windows and the doors as tight as I could, but you know what they say when it comes to the vehicle that I drive, right? Apparently, as a friend told me, there are a few things you can see when looking back at Earth from outer space. The one is the Great Canyon, the second is the Great Wall of China, and the third is the gaps between the doors of a Land Rover Defender. Well, despite that, I must say that the old lady held up quite well. And looking around, I felt like I was literally trapped in a bag of flour. I could not see a thing. And I knew that I just had no option but to wait it out. After about a half an hour or so, I saw this illusion of trees appearing to the side of me. The illusion was there for a second or two and then it was gone. So I set up my tripod inside the vehicle and I positioned my telephoto lens as close to the window as I could. I promise you there was literally very little to focus on. And the composition was equally as challenging because this illusion just kept coming and going in between the gusts. The autofocus just simply would not work. So I decided that I'd set the lens to manual focus and I would pull focus just in front of infinity. And when it came to choosing the aperture, I was reminded of that saying that I think it was Arthur Pellis who said, f8 and just be there. So, when you're in doubt of which aperture to use, just go for a mid-size aperture. So I did exactly that. And I knew that an aperture of f8 would give me just enough sort of depth to be able to get the shot. The big challenge was that the window was actually in the way. Not only was it dirty on the outside, but I didn't want to be shooting through thick glass. So I set up a cable release, got everything ready, and then I wrapped a sweater around my head to use as a scarf for the dust. And then as the gust started to ease and these trees started to appear, I opened the window and shot a number of frames off. And then I closed the window as quickly as I could. The whole car literally filled with dust. And I felt like I was trapped in this terrarium. And funny enough, my old trusted 5D, after this photograph, could not be used for the rest of the trip. The sensor was just too dirty. And even today, when I take it out, the camera still seems to have a stage fright because of this incident. The reason I'm telling you the story is that because at the time, I was aware of emotional attachment. And I was concerned that I would not see the truth behind the veil when processing this picture. So I didn't. I promise you, not for 6 months. Yes, I checked if it was sharp when I got back to the studio. But then I put it away until my emotions had subsided. And I'll come back to this photograph a little later on. The second story I'd like to tell you is about a photograph I recently took in a small town called Bonneville. It's about 200 kilometers outside Cape Town where I live. This photograph was taken on the 11th of January 2016. Again, a date that I will never forget. I was out photographing early one morning and I saw this old shed alongside a railway line quite close to the town itself. And I tried a whole lot of different angles, but I just could not get it to work. I don't know if it was just the light that wasn't right, but it just didn't want to come together. Eventually I got down onto the tracks itself and I tried a really low camera angle to see if I could get something more interesting. Maybe if I just include some of the foreground interest, I could get it to start to work. So I spread out my tripod as wide as I could and I practically placed the camera right down onto the railway tracks itself. And I was kneeling down to compose the shot and I remember my knees getting quite sore. So I sat down on the track itself. After a while I felt this strange vibration and when I looked back, a locomotive was literally 100 yards from me, steaming towards me down the track. I just remember grabbing the tripod and jumping back onto the platform for safety. Still today, I don't know why the train driver didn't sound a horn. It was such a close call. Check this out. Here's a grab shot I took as the locomotive came steaming by. It was the closest I'd ever come to death. The time of the incident would have been 8:28 in the morning, and I literally could see the headlines in front of me. That day I knew that I had a guardian angel looking after me. If I had not sat down on the track, I would have not been aware of the approaching train. So when I got over from the shoot, I was still haunted by the memory of the shot, and I broke a cardinal rule of mine, and I processed the photograph immediately. I'm still embarrassed today that I had placed so much value on it. I mean, I thought this was going to be an absolute winner. And I mean, if you look at it, it is so average, but I promise you, I didn't see it like this. There's only one person on planet Earth that found this photograph interesting, and that was me. Many months later, once all the emotion had worn thin, I could see it for what it actually was. You see, my point is, when photographing both of these pictures, I had experienced outside influences. My desert tree photograph proved to be an absolute winner, And our gallery today doesn't feel complete without a doubt. It's currently on exhibition in our new gallery in Namibia and is still drawing attention. On the other hand, my near-death railway photograph lives in a folder on my hard drive called Private. And it's a story I'll tell my grandchildren one day, but no more than that. Never forget, for every photograph you take, there is a memory. Sometimes that memory is just what the photograph brings to us based on our experiences outside having taken the photograph. And sometimes the memory is of the experience we had while we were taking the photograph. The experience doesn't have to be dramatic. It does not have to be a near-death experience like I've just explained. It could be something really simple. I mean, it could just be the fact that you've used an unusual camera. Maybe you've dug out your old Hasselblad from the storeroom and you photographed some old expired film and you've developed in a makeshift darkroom and you got a result. So suddenly there's a value. Maybe it's the first photograph you managed to take through something like, let's say, pinhole photography, where you were quite surprised to actually get a result without a lens. Or maybe it could be similar to what I had when photographing the tree in the desert. It could be an experience like getting cold and wet while you're taking a photograph. Or having to climb up the side of a cliff to shoot, where you would shoot from a high vantage point. Or almost losing your camera to a rogue wave while photographing too close to the water's edge. It could be any of these, but you get the idea. People often say to me that they enjoy knowing about the story behind the photograph. But never forget that's after the fact, right? It's after they have looked at the photograph and they connect. And then if they get to hear the story behind taking the picture, it's even better. It's like enjoying a great dessert at a restaurant, and once you have tucked into it and it's really interesting, the chef comes to the table and starts to explain what they actually did to create the dessert. It's similar to that. In other words, it's not about telling the story and then insisting that the viewer loves and connects with it. It's about telling the story after they have connected with it. I started to figure out this emotional attachment thing shortly after I got a good friend of mine, Koos van der Linde, an incredible photographic artist, to assist me with curating my work before including it in a portfolio. I used to send him a handful of photographs every now and then wait for the outcome. Sometimes days after I sent it to him, I would hear nothing. And then I'd get that call to say that he'd like to meet up and we can go through some of the photographs he had sent. You must understand that Koos is one of the most honest people I know, to the point of extreme. Plus, he has a brilliant eye for composition and he absolutely loves art. I really dreaded sitting down with him because even though at first I very often didn't agree with his feedback, why? Because my emotions had not worn thin enough. But his analysis proved correct over time. I would sometimes leave these discussions saying, he doesn't get it. Later, I found out that it was actually me that didn't get it. And the most honest critic that I have is my wife. No frills, no fuss. She just calls it as it is. She's not an artist, but she knows what works. Today, I have a complete workflow structure in place to make sure that I can navigate my way around this phenomenon. This is a discussion that I've included now in my fine art photography masterclasses. All the way from mentally preparing for the shoot right through to file management, workflow ethic, and the final image selection. It is that important, well, certainly to me. For now, if there's anything I'd like you to take away from this discussion, is that you understand that the way you see a photograph that you have taken may appear very, very different to others who interpret it. And then, if at all possible, consider setting aside your photographs for at least 6 months, especially when you're working on a portfolio or preparing for an exhibition or even planning to post on social media. This waiting period will allow your emotions to settle and will provide you with a fresh perspective when you return to your work. Then I would look for somebody who can critique your work, somebody who can offer constructive feedback. Look for someone who is not obligated to tell you what you want to hear, but is committed to providing honest and insightful evaluations. and then be open-minded and receptive to suggestions. But it's important that you give yourself time to absorb the feedback and process it. Remember that by taking time and accepting feedback is an essential component to your artistic development. Balancing your emotional attachment with objective evaluation will lead to a more refined portfolio, a far better exhibition, and your social media presence will be much stronger. Roger Kingston said this. He said, "A camera is a save button for the mind's eye." And the great Henri Cartier-Bresson, one of my all-time heroes, takes it further and says, "Of all the means of expression, photography is the one that fixes a precise moment in time." I leave you with this. There is a difference between capturing emotion in a photograph versus the emotion we experience while photographing. The one is important, the other one is not. In order to make good judgment, it's not the memory of the photograph that needs to lay down and be quiet. It's our emotion based on external elements that needs to do so. Friends in art and photography, if you have found this discussion interesting and of value, please subscribe to my channel. Until I see you again, go well, stay creative, and God bless. Cheers for now.